Well, hello. You may have seen this story in the news, but it's possible that you missed it as it was buried in a million headlines about Greg Wallace telling some naughty jokes. But anyway, Syria's government, headed by, well, the former president Bashar al-Assad, has collapsed again. And it's been taken over by Al-Qaeda terrorists, news which Keir Starmer welcomes. Yeah, we'll get into that. Now, if you think this doesn't have ramifications for us here in the UK or in Europe, you're wrong. There are 500,000 Syrians in Germany, 50,000-ish in the UK alone. And people took to the streets celebrating the liberation of Syria just yesterday. But not everyone in the UK was happy about this. Now, there are some Syrians who fled because of Assad, supposedly, and there are other Syrians who fled because of opposition forces to Assad. So, of course, that conflict rolls out onto Britain's streets, and there are a few little scuffles. Nothing too major, as I understand. Yet. Now, I say yet because there's plenty of time for that to escalate. We have this very bizarre situation in the UK where, because we've brought people from all over the world, we're now bringing a lot of those conflicts with them onto our streets. So, for example, we have almost 2 million people from India and 2 million people from Pakistan here in the UK. Well, what happens in the UK when those two countries go to war again? Of course, as you'll know, I am a complete optimist. So I'm always looking for the silver lining in the cloud. And you would probably think that it's something along the lines of, well, you've got all of these people who fled Syria and they're now celebrating on the streets of Germany, Ireland and the UK. Surely that means that some of those people now feel safe to return back to their homeland, Syria. And one Irishman went to one of these big celebrations. They're not protests, they're celebrations, I guess. And he asked some people exactly that. They explained that, well, finally Syria is free of Assad. And so his next question naturally was, well, does that mean you'll be returning back to Syria then? And here's what they said.
The entire country is free. So is it free now? We are free now.
So, finally. So now does that mean all you go back to Syria now?
The economic situation isn't correct.
Okay. So economic reasons, you're in Ireland, economic reasons.
Ah, I see. So because the economic situation in Syria is bad, you'll be staying in Ireland. Fascinating. So maybe it wasn't all about Bashar al-Assad after all. Maybe it was just about economics. Anyway, I'm sure our glorious leaders have got something to say about this, and of course, they have. Keir Starmer stood on stage and he said he welcomes the news that Bashar al-Assad's government has collapsed. And on the surface of it, this is a perfectly rational position to hold. Bashar al-Assad is a bad guy. He used chemical weapons on his own population. Make no mistake that I am not defending Bashar al-Assad at any point in this video. But what's really interesting is who has taken over the country. It's Volodymyr Zelensky. Okay, it's not actually Volodymyr Zelensky, although the resemblance is absolutely uncanny. They've even got the same wardrobe designer, I guess, with that little green shirt. Now, in all seriousness, Syria has been captured by a man named al-Jilani. And al-Jilani is the leader of a group called HTS. I can't remember what it stands for, and I frankly don't really care. But HTS are well understood to be an offshoot from Al-Qaeda. In fact, HTS themselves are a proscribed terror organisation here in the UK and in the US. So much so that al-Jilani still has a $10 million bounty on his head, put forward by the US government. I reached out to the US Embassy Syria, although I suspect they're quite busy, asking if the reward still stood because I may have some details about his location. He's in Damascus. Now, I don't think I'm going to be claiming that $10 million bounty anytime soon, unfortunately. But we do seem to find ourselves in this very strange situation where Keir Starmer is actively cheering on an Al-Qaeda military success in the Middle East. How bizarre. Perhaps Starmer can put al-Jilani in touch with Lord Ali and get him some new work clothes. I presume since he's going to leave the jihadi terrorist life behind and become the noble president of Syria, he'll probably need them. Now look, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, Keir Starmer saying he welcomes Assad being toppled doesn't mean that he supports Al-Qaeda. Well, let me give you a thought experiment. Imagine that the devil himself came down to earth and deposed Assad. Would Starmer still stand on stage and say, oh, I welcome the news that Assad has fallen, praise be to Lucifer? I don't think so. Whoever works in Keir Starmer's PR team, you need to do better than this and maybe just have an understanding of geopolitics. Okay, so I know what you're thinking because I can read your mind. You're thinking, hang on, I'm getting a bit of deja vu here. I think I've seen this all before. And you have. And here's where you've seen it. In 2011, Bashar al-Assad in Syria was deposed for the first time. And what did you get? You got the Syrian civil war. And then just a couple of years later, Muammar al-Gaddafi was toppled in Libya. And what did you get? Well, you got the Libyan crisis, 10 years of civil war. And what about Saddam Hussein when he was captured and shuffled off this mortal coil? Well, you got the rise of ISIS, which obviously spread to Syria. I understand that these people are not good people, but deposing them and then just leaving the Islamists to take over the countries has never, ever worked out well. You know, it always leads to civil war and it always leads to mass unrest and usually a very extraordinary amount of violence. I don't understand how Western leaders haven't learned this lesson, to the point where Keir Starmer should be smart enough to go, I'm not going to come out and give this a positive spin because this is probably all going to go horribly wrong. But he has anyway. Now, it's not all Keir Starmer, just to be clear. Old senile boy Joe Biden, well, he's offered a hand of friendship out to Al-Qaeda. Yeah, the same Al-Qaeda who just 2 decades ago flew 2 planes into the Twin Towers. But I guess we're, giving them a second chance and hoping they do better this time. Fascinating. Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has also quite literally offered the hand of peace, but simultaneously pushed Israeli troops into Syria and then bombed the hell out of Damascus.
Equally, we send a hand of peace to all those beyond our border in Syria.
Now look, that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I actually fully understand the Israeli position. They don't want a terror state literally on their border armed with chemical weapons. So of course they're going to do what they've got to do, which I guess in this case is destroying all of those chemical weapons and anything that could do harm to Israelis. I'm actually envious of the nationalism and the overriding feeling to protect your own citizens that Israel seems to have. I kind of wish all countries had that level of nationalism, but that's a topic for another day. So what then does all of this mean for Europe? Well, every time this happens, there is a massive wave of refugees heading into Europe. Last time, in 2015, 500,000 Syrians headed to Germany. And very quickly, they were on the streets of Germany, demanding that Germany become part of the Caliphate and adopt Sharia law.
Jeder, der sich als Muslim bezeichnet, muss die Scharia wollen auf der ganzen Welt. Ich will die Scharia in Deutschland auf jeden Fall.
Würdest du die deutsche Verfassung aushebeln, wenn du die Gelegenheit hättest?
Auf jeden Fall.
Okay, danke.
Okay, so do we have any data that could help us understand what happens when a European country receives a large body of Syrian refugees, migrants, whatever you want to call them? Well, fortunately we do. We have it from Denmark. Denmark's one of the only countries that will put data out like this. And the Danish data is pretty clear and frankly not good. 62% of Syrians in Denmark have been convicted of a serious crime. Now, only 21% of Syrian women living in Denmark actually work. That must place a huge burden on the state. And for a particular type of crime, which I won't name here, but it's very unpleasant, especially for women, well, that's reached an all-time high in Denmark, absolutely surged. And which nationality is right at the top of the list of offenders? Syrians. It's just data. You know, the data, the facts, the statistics, they do not care about your feelings. You can try and explain all of that away. You can talk about socio-economic factors to your heart's content. I really don't care. The reality is, the fact is, that is happening and it's very, very bad for the Danish people. And I'm willing to bet that that data is mirrored across the rest of Europe. But we won't know because the data is never released. Now, of course, there's another very, very serious threat that typically comes out of the Middle East, and that's the threat from terrorism. And here's what the UAE's foreign minister, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, had to say about this and Europe just a couple of years ago.
And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
And here's a man called the Imam of Peace. He's an imam, and he's describing what he thinks will happen to Europe if we continue with these migration policies.
No, you are in a crisis. You went to the Muslim countries and you imported the garbage that the Muslim countries wanted to put in prison or isolate away from society. You went and you imported them. Why? For cheap labor. But these Islamist extremists, they don't want to work. They want free welfare. They want to marry French women, blonde hair, blue eyes. They don't have time to work. So look at Poland. They don't complain from Islamic extremism, not a single terrorist attack in Poland. The moment they sense there's a problem, they crack down on it. Polish policy, beautiful. The French, no, come. When they come, they use the resources. They go to Washington, D.C., and they sit in Congress. They support the Iranian regime. They go against the sanctions in Congress, right, with their hijab. Why? Because the ideology is filth to begin with. When you import that, or you allow it in, or you amplify it, or you glorify it in any way, you make your bed, sleep in it.
So look, the simulation seems to be falling apart. We've got this bizarre situation where the Western leaders in the Western world seem to be engaging in a logical fallacy, a bit of schoolboy argumentation, which is my enemy's enemy is my friend. Bashar al-Assad is a bad guy, therefore him going is necessarily absolutely good, no matter who replaces him. But of course, that's a terrible, terrible argument. It is very possible to replace something bad with something even worse, although our leaders don't seem to quite have cottoned onto that possibility. We'll see what happens. I hope that Syria does not collapse even further and descend into civil war. I don't really understand how that can practically be avoided at this point. I think we'll probably have a lot of people eating their own words in a couple of months' time, and we'll maybe see some pretty horrific scenes coming out of Syria. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Leave some comments. I reply to all the comments, or I try to leave some likes. And yeah, I don't know, the channel's kind of been struggling a little bit for the last few days. Not a lot of people, or the last few videos, not a lot of people have been watching the videos. Maybe I'm putting too many out. Maybe it's just a bit boring. You tell me. It's geopolitics. It's not about the UK, so maybe people will be pretty uninterested in this topic. I guess we'll find out. We'll see how this video does. Anyway, thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in, especially to those regulars. I'm talking like Sylvie, Martin, Stephen, and loads of others. Really good people. Thank you very much. And yeah, see you at the next one.